Coming up on Talking Points, President Joe Biden is visiting Puerto Rico following the aftermath of Hurricane Ian. The storm wreaking havoc on Florida as well. We'll have more on Ian's impact in just a few moments.
And Brazil's presidential election takes another turn. We'll have more on the candidates in the over 150 million ballots cast.
Plus, one of the world's most crucial gas lines bursts. We have more on the potential consequences this could have on the world. Talking Point starts right now. Apologies for some technical difficulties there, but welcome into Talking Points. My name is Teagan Brown.
And I'm Chilekasi. Adele. Lots of stuff to get to tonight. Let's start with the headlines.
On Friday, the House of Representatives voted to pass a stoppage bill that funds the government through December 16th. As a part of the bill, $12 billion will be allocated to providing Ukraine with weapons to fight against the Russian invasion. The bill also includes emergency money to help aid the victims of Hurricane Ian. However, the funding bill does not include the Biden administration's request for $22 billion in COVID-19 research and treatment.
National Archives and Records Administration is still searching for missing Trump White House records. In the letter sent to the House Oversight Committee on Friday, National Archives say they are still searching for records from Trump administration officials. They say these officials, conducted official business using non-official electronic messaging accounts. It's still unclear on whether former President Donald Trump has turned over all his presidential records to the National Archives. And over 100 people have now died as a result of Hurricane Ian. This comes just days after the Category 4 storm made landfall on Florida's southwestern coast.
Nearly 600,000 homes and businesses in the state are left without power or clean drinking water. And in some parts of Florida, like Naples and its suburbs, storm surges hit record highs that resulted in ocean water flooding into the city.
As Florida's death toll climbs, disaster relief is also ramping up. President Biden said earlier this week he'd send federal funding to Florida to aid those affected. However, Florida Senator Marco Rubio says the state would not support any funding that is not, quote, emergency relief.
Rubio also said, quote, "What we are going to ask for Florida is what we supported for every other state in the country that has been affected by natural disasters, and that is emergency relief that is designated to be used immediately." Well, let's move overseas quickly, where members of the Kremlin are beginning to turn on Russian President Vladimir Putin. And on Friday, Putin announced the annexation of 4 Ukrainian regions. However, Russian forces soon retreated after this announcement. Talking Points analyst Ericka Love joins us to talk more about what strategies Putin may use to move forward. Now, Ericka, after Putin declared Lyman as a Russian territory, he pulled Russian troops out of there. Tell us a little bit about why he decided to do this.
Yes, so on Friday, there were over 300,000 troops in Lyman along the northeast border of Ukraine in what is now being considered territory according to Russia. He illegally annexed 4 regions within Ukraine and called it the New Russia, essentially, just for the following day on Saturday to pull troops out because Ukrainian counteroffense was able to come in and encircle all of the Russian troops and cut them off from supply lines and sources in the area. And because of this, Putin panicked, he pulled his troops out, and were able to move them back into Russian territory for proper protection.
Ericka, we're hearing about the internal conflicts between Russian bureaucrats about the status of the war. What is the root cause of some of these disagreements within the Kremlin?
Well, a lot of people within Putin's inner circle are pushing him to declare things almost as far as martial law. They want him to yield small nuclear weapons to make a point. Many people feel like the generals within the Russian army are incompetent. You know, some even coming out on Twitter and making statements across different platforms to put down generals who are part of their army. The U.S. has already strategized ways with the EU that they could prevent a nuclear bomb from happening. But at the end of the day, many people within the Russian circle for Putin are not happy with how he retreated from the area.
And Ericka, in past speeches, Putin has referenced the U.S.'s involvement in other foreign conflicts as a kind of justification for Russia going into Ukraine during this involvement. Can you talk, a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so Putin sees this as, compromising the territorial integrity of Russia. He sees these 4 regions as Russian territory now. But the biggest thing is he says that, the U.S. went into Iraq. They bombed, Hiroshima and places in Japan. So why can't Russia do it? And he doesn't think that we're any better than they are. His biggest thing is he does not want to have a ceasefire. He refuses to retreat any further, especially after this weekend.
It's a never-changing story. Talking Points analyst Ericka Love, thank you. Now over to campus news. Wyoming Congresswoman Liz Cheney was on the SU Hill earlier today. She spoke at a Q&A hosted by the Maxwell School, and she then spoke to hundreds in Schein's Goldstein Auditorium for over an hour. Cheney touched on many topics from January 6th to gay marriage. Talking Points analyst Jake Morel live outside Schein right now to recap the event. Jake.
Guys, good evening. I'm here outside the Schein Student Center where just a few hours ago today, Congresswoman Liz Cheney brought hundreds of students out to talk. Her main point? Defending democracy.
And on the night of January 6th, as I walked into Statuary Hall, leaning up against every statue were members of the SWAT team, exhausted because they'd spent the day defending the Capitol building and defending our democratic process of counting electoral votes.
As the vice chairman of the House Select Committee to investigate January 6th, Cheney promoted the rule of law today.
And one of the most dangerous and destructive things that Donald Trump did was go to war with the rule of law. He has a duty above everybody else to defend and protect the Constitution, but in particular to ensure the laws are faithfully executed.
The Congresswoman also commented on former President Donald Trump's treatment of the peaceful transition of power.
The tradition and the history in our nation of a peaceful transfer of power. And every single president of the United States, every one, has honored that duty, has treated it as sacred, except for one.
Cheney said she was surprised about losing her position of power and gave her input on the state of the Republican Party.
I think that the party itself has to get back to a place where we're able to say, this is what we stand for, this is why people should vote for us, this is what we believe in, and being able to convey to people that they can trust us.
And finally, the Congresswoman left students with a piece of advice and a call to action.
The lesson of January 6th is that the only thing that makes a difference is people. And we need every single good and honorable person of character to step forward and serve the country.
Asked about her stance on gay marriage, and she once said that she was against it, but now she supports it. So what did she have to say about this current stance?
Well, Teagan, just like you said, Liz Cheney actually famously ran on a platform of being against gay marriage. But today, she reiterated to us that she has changed her stance. She said that the issue has actually affected her family and become more personal for her. So Liz Cheney said now that she is in support of people marrying who they want to marry.
And Jake, Cheney also was asked today about her current stances on policies, including climate change. What did she have to say specifically about climate change today?
Cheney took a different route in talking about climate change today. She talked about the clean energy production in the United States, and she claimed that the United States is the cleanest energy producer in the world. She also said that people who want to go fully to non-renewable energy are neglecting the technological advances that we've made here in the United States. So what I think is that people forget that Cheney is a Republican. Watching her be the vice chairman of the January 6th committee and be so outspoken against Trump, people forget that Cheney still holds these Republican views.
Talking Points analyst Jake Morel, thank you. Coming up on Talking Points, migrants in Italy facing uncertainty following a victorious election for the far right. We'll discuss the international implications after the break. Stay with us. Hey, welcome back to Talking Points. Preliminary Italian election results show that Giorgia Meloni will become the country's first female prime minister. Meloni's Brothers of Italy party will take power. It's the first time a far-right party has been charged there since Benito Mussolini's reign in the 1940s. Talking Points analyst Anna Salewycz joins us to break down the results and explain the potential implications this has. Anna.
Thank you, Chile. Last Tuesday, Italian voters elected all members of the two chambers of the Italian parliament. A two-thirds majority threshold is now necessary for constitutional changes, as the size of the chambers will be cut in half. Provisional results give the right-wing coalition a total of 44.4% of the vote in the Senate, suggesting that the right will take over Italy's government. Giorgia Meloni, the leader of the Conservative Brothers of Italy party, is expected to be Italy's first female prime minister. Meloni has taken firm positions against abortion, immigration, drugs, and the European Union, European integration. The Brothers of Italy traces its origin to the Italian social movement, which was founded by ex-fascists after World War II. Many believe this will be Italy's most right-wing government since Mussolini.
And Anna, with a lot of things regarding Europe, we always try and relate it to the war in Ukraine. How can Meloni's victory here, how could this potentially affect the war in Ukraine?
Well, Meloni is notorious for being a Eurosceptic. So it might destabilize the G7, which has been a strong supporter of Ukraine against Russia. Also, one of Meloni's top priorities is addressing the energy crisis and inflation, which is driven by the war in Ukraine. So maybe, we might see Europe plunge into a depression in the winter. So if that does happen, it is likely that she may not want to continue giving Italian resources in support of Ukraine. But she has said that she's against Putin and supports Ukraine and NATO, so we will just have to wait and see.
And this is not the first time we've seen this idea of Euroscepticism come in Europe, talking about Britain with Brexit, places like Hungary as well. How are other countries in Europe, around the world, responding to this victory?
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned Hungary because the prime minister there is very excited for Meloni's projected victory. And most right-wing European politicians are, including the the Polish prime minister. Speaking of the French prime minister, she made a comment actually kind of jabbing at Meloni, saying that all European governments should adhere to these democratic values, especially on abortion, law, and basic human rights, which, Meloni is against abortion and has a very firm position on immigration and drugs. But we can also see, the Biden administration a little bit worried. Just they're a little just worried that Meloni's win will weaken Italy's commitment to Ukraine. So, right-wing politicians are very eager, to see Meloni win, but everyone else is just waiting anxiously.
And we'll see how all these different countries see how it plays out. Lots of different opinions going on there. Talking Points analyst Anna Salewycz, thank you. Over to Teagan at the wall now.
Chile, thank you so much. Well, to Brazil now, where nearly 160 million people cast their ballots in the country's presidential election. Incumbent Jair Bolsonaro is seeking his second term in office. Bolsonaro trailed by 10 points to former President Lula da Silva in recent polls before the election. Here to break down the numbers behind Brazil's presidential election is Talking Points analyst Dominic Chiappone. Now, Dominic, can you start by breaking down why this election is so important to the country?
Yeah, so incumbent President Jair Bolsonaro is taking on the former President Lula da Silva as well as 10 other candidates. And Bolsonaro was elected in 2018. He's going for his second term. There's a lot of implications, but we should start off by first breaking down the numbers for this election for the first round. So, for instance, Silva, the former president, garnered 48% of the vote, Bolsonaro with 43%, and then the other candidates combined with 8%. The key indicator is that Bolsonaro is part of the Liberal Party, which is like liberty, not necessarily like democracy or liberalism in America. Silva is a member of the Workers' Party. If we shift over to now how this affects the future election, the winning candidate needs to get more than 50% of the votes. Because neither did that, both Bolsonaro and Silva will face off in a second round of voting. That will happen the day before Halloween on October 30th. And again, almost 160 million Brazilians will be eligible to vote for that election.
So Bolsonaro, the incumbent, was trailing in the polls before Election Day. Why are Brazilian voters so concerned with that right now?
So let's take a step back and look at the first term of Bolsonaro. There's a lot of controversy, everything from his response to the COVID-19 pandemic to the consistent deforestation of the Amazon. But his big campaign promise when he ran and won in 2018 was anti-corruption, especially after the former president Silva was charged with corruption and accused of that. Bolsonaro, for instance, spoke out with the United Nations about his anti-corruption campaign and Brazil's new direction. This is what he had to say.
I come here to showcase a different Brazil vis-à-vis what is portrayed on newspapers or seen on television. Brazil has changed a great deal after we took office in January 2019. For 2 years and 8 months, we have had no concrete case of corruption.
Now, for Bolsonaro, that was unfortunately not true because in 2021, a criminal investigation was opened up because Bolsonaro was accused of delaying vaccine arrivals into Brazil from other countries. So we have a case where both candidates have instances and accusations of corruption.
So Bolsonaro has been accused of, delegitimizing the election, spreading misinformation. How is this affecting that peaceful transition of power that the people obviously want?
You have a fascinating situation in Brazil right now because, again, the two leading candidates have their strengths as well as their weaknesses. But the key indicator was Bolsonaro for the past year and even in recent weeks has basically said, if I don't win the election by more than 60%, yeah, there's a whole host of reasons. But at the end of the day, this is the largest democracy in all Latin America, so it's really going to make a difference for the election and for the future democracy. Talking
Points analyst Dominic Chiappone, thank you so much. Coming up on Talking Points, one of the most important pipelines in the world bursts. How this impacts the world's gas supply, next, after the break.
Maybe he's really focused.
Maybe he likes spinning the wheels.
Maybe he just loves trucks.
Preoccupation with objects is one early sign of autism. Learn the others today.
Welcome to my house. Everybody's pretty tired of each other. The walls were closing in. If this sounds like your house, try going someplace new. YourLifeYourVoice.org. It could help you find a little more breathing room.
Here's to the straggly ones, the lopsided ones, the first ones, the I miss my beard ones. And hey, I look good with this ones. But no way he's grown that in a week ones. The black, brown, red, and gray ones. That one. The itchy ones. The never forgotten ones. The ones grown by Dad. The ones grown for Dad. The started late ones. The absolutely filthy ones. The drawn on ones. The finger ones. The pin ones. The I nearly didn't do it this year ones. And the yeah, why not ones. They all raise awareness, raise funds, start conversations, and save lives. Because whatever you grow will save a bro. Learn more at Movember.com.
Welcome back to Talking Points. The Nordstream 2 pipeline, which runs from Russia into Germany, burst in 2 places last week. Many questions now being raised about how the leak started. Let's bring in our analyst Jacob Goldberg now to discuss. Jacob, listen, how has Europe and the rest of the world responded to this situation, and is any work being done right now as we speak?
Well, before we get into how the world leaders, especially in Europe, are responding to the pipeline leak, we got to talk about the severity of the situation. We're talking about millions of tons of methane gas being put into our atmosphere. This will severely hurt climate change movements across the world, so that's important to mention. But as far as how European leaders are taking this, European leaders believe that these leaks were no accident. Scientists from Sweden and Denmark say that it was caused by a power underwater blast. Whether or not that was a human blast or natural blast is to be determined, and we still don't know. And Russian President Putin claims the leakage comes as a result of a Western terrorist attacks. Is there any validity behind those comments? No validity so far, as I said. Same with the Western leaders. Putin is trying to put the blame on the West, saying that he believes also that this was no accident. Instead, he thinks that the NATO people were behind it. And he is launching a criminal investigation. Gazprom is one of the biggest oil companies in the world. They're Russian-backed. They own most of the pipeline, the Nord pipeline, and they're doing their own investigation. Dmitry Peskov, a Kremlin spokesperson, actually came out with a statement about the whole situation. Here's what he had to say. He said, quote, it's very difficult to imagine that such a terrorist action could take place without the involvement of some state. And that's some scary stuff coming from Dmitry Peskov and the Kremlin. That's, there it says that Russia thinks that another organization was involved in this, leakage. And energy is such a big issue, too, as we start to head towards the colder months as well. It's something we'll be watching. Yes. Jake, thank you. Over to Teagan.
Thank you. The U.S. stock market is seeing its lowest numbers since the beginning of COVID. On Friday, the Dow hit lows that haven't been seen since March of 2020. Talking Points analyst Katie Fongvongsa joins us to break down what this means for the economy and where things go from here. Katie?
Thank you, Teagan. So we're going to take a look at the Dow Jones number since March of 2020 to today. So on this side, we see that the stock was about a little over 19,000 points, and then that was when the pandemic hit. So the economy was kind of slowing down there. We weren't seeing anything coming through. People weren't at work, so nothing could flow through. And then we built back in 2021, where the economy started booming at about almost 36,000 points. And that was when we kind of saw things coming back, things getting back to normal. But unfortunately, now today, or last Friday actually, in 2022, we're seeing that that peak is going back down as the stock market is falling. And for Dow Jones, this has fallen about 9%, which includes a lot of factors that we're seeing. And also in the Dow Jones market, we know that the top companies under there are Apple, Coca-Cola, Disney, and Microsoft, Walmart, and Nike. And we're seeing with Nike that they're actually pulling back on their demand for amid the holiday season, and they're not increasing much anything at all. And we're also seeing that Apple, they just released their iPhone 14, and their products they're slowing down the production of their products as well. And then for today, we've seen the Dow Jones market increase by 2.7%.
And Katie Fongvongsa joins me at the desk now. Now, Katie, we're looking at these numbers. We're seeing how they've dropped over the past few years. But what exactly made this drop at the end of March of 2020?
So this major drop includes a lot of items. Dow Jones is now in the red, but they brought it up today, as we can see. We're seeing high inflation rates continuing all over the world, including the U.S., which is combating rising prices. And the U.S. Federal Treasury has been putting in work as well, just trying to get things to even out. And also, we're also seeing central banks reacting back, trying to go along with the flow of the international economy. And also, the U.S. now has a weak dollar, which includes an incentive for other countries to invest in our country, as they would benefit from that as well.
Now, the last time the country fell into a major recession was back in 2008. Is the stock market, dropping, and what we're talking about right now, is that a sign that the U.S. could experience another recession?
So we're actually seeing multiple signs now. There's something called a bear market, which is where a stock might fall 20% from its last peak, and we could see that in Dow Jones, along with about 30 of their companies involved. And also, we see all across the U.S. for like the past couple months, past year, consumers have taken a step back from buying non-perishable items. They're not buying household goods and furniture, clothes, things like that. And for example, we see FedEx, they've just released a statement where they're taking their production back down a notch. We're not seeing a lot of packages come through, so their production is going to be down about 40%. And also the war in Ukraine is another factor. Oil is very expensive, flowing into Europe, flowing into the US. We saw that all this summer. Gas prices were very high, and the Great Recession of 2008 also has similar factors and trends that we're seeing today.
Talking Points analyst Katie Fongvongsa, thank you so much. And coming up on Talking Points, Iran's supreme leader has broken his silence on nationwide protests in his country. Which country did he blame for the international outrage? Find out. Talking Points returns in just 90 seconds.
I see you mobbing over her. Let's go. Let's mob. Let's crawl. Let's crawl. Let's crawl. Hey, yo, we mobbing. Come on, girl. Let's crawl. Hey, yo, let's crawl. Hey, yo, let's crawl. Hey, let's crawl. Hey, yo, let's crawl.
Welcome back to Talking Points. Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, says the U.S. and Israel are to blame for the country's violent protest. He says the two countries planned the protest in an effort to destabilize the country. Teagan, we're hearing from Khamenei for the first time really in a few weeks. He stayed mostly silent on these issues since these protests have began. He says he's gravely concerned. He added that the Iranians are calling for, quote, just and universal principles, and he said that the U.S. stands with Iranian women today.
Yeah, and actually we're seeing over in Iran, a lot of students are stepping up and protesting. There have been over 100 of these Iranian universities with students that have stepped up to speak out against this.
Not even universities. You see some people as young as 14 today. You know, one of my professors is actually Iranian, and he was down in New York to protest over the weekend, but very young people in this movement.
Yeah, and it's not, just Iranians that we're seeing over there that have been involved in these protests. Obviously, like we were saying, that supreme leader is blaming foreign forces, and there have actually been 9 Europeans that were arrested during these protests so far.
And we'll see what comes of that. Well, that's our show for tonight. Be sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram at CitrusTV News. I'm Chilekasi, Adele.
And I'm Teagan Brown. We're back next week, same time, same place. Until then, have a great night, Syracuse.